So I will tell you exactly how we're going to be reviewing and testing out this Dang Highflow spray paint today, and exactly how the Dang Highflow paint came to be. Basically, about a year ago, BombingScience.com decided to get into the graffiti market themselves and release their very own spray paint. That, of course, was the low pressure prime Dang paint, which they had me do a full honest review of at the time. And now, a year later, BombingScience.com has contacted me again and said, hey Sciz, we just released the new Dang Highflow spray paint and we're wondering if you'd be interested in doing a review of it. So that being said, today I'll be offering you my 100% honest opinions, as well as everything you need to know about this Dang Highflow spray paint while you see me do a full graffiti piece. And while we take a look at the Dang Highflow's stats, pricing, etc., we'll even be seeing just how much a Dang Highflow 400ml can covers compared to the Dang low pressure spray paint. You may be thinking it's similar, but the results might surprise you. And even after that, we will be testing out exactly how the Dang Highflow spray paint sprays using some of the most common caps on the graffiti market that most graffiti writers and artists will be using. Before I tell you at the end if this spray paint here is something that I would legitimately like to continue using, or if it's a pass for me and why. Hell, I'll even throw in a rating out of 10 for you guys on this Dang Highflow spray paint. So if that sounds good, let's get right to it. So the new Dang Highflow spray paint is currently released in 48 colors by BombingScience.com, and BombingScience is the sole distributor of this spray paint. I think a lot of people, including myself, who are used to painting with high pressure spray paint, weren't able to feel totally comfortable using the low pressure Dang paint. So BombingScience did what they seem to do best, and they listened. They seem to have their ear to the ground with that sort of stuff, and thus the Dang Highflow cans were made in 400ml cans, as well as 600ml high pressure tall cans for those more bomber oriented graffiti writers. The tall cans come in just 4 colors, those being black, white, gold, and silver, i.e. the classic bombing setup. The Dang Highflow cans come fitted with an orange dot fat cap, as opposed to the softer Carolina fat caps that the low pressure Dang cans come with in their 400ml size. If you aren't familiar with that cap, we'll be taking a look specifically at it, as well as many others later in the video, to see what they spray like when you use them on the Dang Highflow cans, because as we know, every type of can has a different valve, and thus the caps spray a little differently on each type of can. Just to quickly tell you the relative pricing of the Dang Highflow spray paint, the interview I did with Fred down at BombingScience.com really does sum up the pricing. He said, "This is what Dang is all about. For the paint and the marker products, we want writers to paint more, but not with cheap quality tools." And he said that in relation to the cheaper pricing of Dang paint and the Dang Flex 15 mops that were just released. You can check a full comprehensive review of the Flex mops out in the corner where the cards are, or in the description below. The Dang Highflow is priced currently at $4.85 US per can, and the black and white cans are always on sale, as they say, at a price of just $4.39 USD per can. So in other words, this paint still does undercut the competition by quite a ways in relation to your big brands such as Molotov, Montana, and possibly even Ironlac, depending on your location. So if the paint does stand up to the test and prove that it is a great all-around high-pressure spray paint, then that will solidify it in the minds of graffiti artists, writers, and muralists as a high-value product to be using. And for what it's worth, these are my thoughts on the Dang Highflow and what I noticed painting initially with the Dang Highflow spray paint. So just to be clear, the pressure of the Dang Highflow is high pressure, it says right on the side of the can, right beside the Dang logo, that it is a high pressure paint. And right on the other side of the Dang logo, I think you'll also find, it says it is a gloss paint in all 48 colors. And I would say it feels to me like a high pressure paint the same way other high pressure paints feel like high pressure paints, if that makes sense. But it does spray a little bit differently because of the valve system. But I will explain more about exactly what I mean by that when I talk specifically about the valves, because that's a very important subject and it deserves a bit of time all on its own. Painting with the Dang Highflow paint to me feels like it keeps you moving at a good pace. If you're like me, the high pressure paint is what I grew up with using, so it feels very natural to me, and it feels quick enough that if you're in a situation where you feel you need to be putting down lines at a particularly quick pace, you're more than able to do that with this paint. At the same time though, it is smooth enough for outlines if your can control is good and you want to try and put a sort of skinnier cap on there. And even though we'll be testing out all the caps a little bit later, I will say that the stock cap that comes on it sprays particularly nicely, and I really thought it was a good cap choice for them to include with the can. The only thing I will say, and I won't get into this in too much detail either, but I'd say the pressure is a little bit too high if you're working with a color like, say, their white that seems to be sort of watery and seems to have a few opacity issues. There are a few colors in their color line that do have sort of opacity issues and almost seem just a little bit watery to me. So as you can imagine, that can be a little bit problematic when you need a thick opaque layer in an outline of one of those less opaque colors or something like that. But I'm not going to get into the opacity too much right now because we did a full comprehensive opacity test when we did a review of the Dang Prime paint, aka the Dang low pressure paint. So if you do want to take a look at that, which I would highly recommend because it's a very important part of the review, and if you're deciding between a Dang high pressure and low pressure, it might be a good time to take a look at the low pressure review. You can check that out in the top right hand corner as well, or in the description. So in terms of the color vibrancy, there's definitely nothing to complain about. If anything, I would say that a lot of the colors are actually above average compared to some other spray paint brands. Specifically, I tested out the reds and the yellows and the blues, and all of those colors were very vibrant. I was really pleased with them. They all looked really mouth-wateringly vibrant, if that makes sense to anyone else. I guess what I'm trying to say is the colors were very true, and something I guess I should also say is all the colors are sprayed on the color donuts themselves, so the colors should match pretty much perfectly with what's in the can on the color ring. Obviously, it's like any other spray paint. If you do a couple layers or just a very slow layer, you're going to get the truest version of that color that's in the can. So although this is a high pressure spray paint, it does feel like it has a very soft valve and soft atomization in particular, and that soft atomization is great for flares and of course great for gradients and fades as well in pieces. And spray paint cans with that kind of atomization make them feel like very good quality spray paints, and that's exactly how this one feels to work with. It doesn't just spit out paint like the wonderful Iron Lac cans do for us. I sort of have this thing where I say, if anything is going to screw up the piece I'm doing, it should be me and not the spray paint can. And these cans feel reliable and consistent in terms of the pressurization and the valve atomization. So I guess from a functionality standpoint, I'm getting at here that's a totally fine spray paint in terms of that. So if you do want to see the finished product of both of the pieces I showed you a little bit of footage of today, we will get to that later in the video, but right now we're going to be testing out just how much exactly one of these Dang Highflow cans can cover on a wall. So it's quite loud out here this morning. I hope you can hear me. Basically, now that we've got a bit of an idea of just how the Dang Highflow feels, I just want to see exactly how much a can of this stuff cover. So what we're gonna do first is just lay down as much as we can with the Dang Highflow paint right here, and then what we're gonna do is do the same thing over top with a can of the low pressure Dang paint. Of course, these are both 400 milliliter cans. They should have about the same coverage, although the differences in pressurization can make marginal differences in coverage sometimes. So that's just what we want to test out quickly. So we're going to do that and give ourselves a nice background so that we can get our cap test going right now. So let's see what happens. By my rough measurements at the free wall, you can tell that it's about 2.5 meters squared coverage per can of the Highflow Dang paint, and I would also say that the same goes for the low pressure Dang paint as well. You can see there is a negligible increase there, but it's so negligible that it could have just been a difference in my spray pattern. So really the final figure we're dealing with here is about 2.5 meters squared, give or take a little bit, I'd say. Now, to a lot of writers, that statistic might not be very useful, but to people who are planning murals or bigger productions, that could actually come into play when you're figuring out how much paint to bring. So hopefully that's useful to someone out there. Anyone who has used a good number of spray paint brands or cans will tell you that in a lot of cases the valve system makes all the difference in the world. That's why today we are going to be testing out most of the most common caps that graffiti artists, muralists, and writers are using today on female valve spray paint cans with the Dang Highflow spray paint. We want to get a good idea of just how these valve systems perform and what they spray like using each of the most common caps on the graffiti market. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with the stock cap of these Dang Highflow cans. Then we're going to test out some skinny caps in a line and dot test, as well as tagging up a few subscribers' names. After that, we'll do the same thing with our fat caps. And of course, I'll make sure to tell you exactly how these feel or what you guys might not be able to see on camera while I'm doing this line and dot test. Let's get to that. So for the first three caps you're seeing here, these would actually be great caps if you wanted to just use three caps, like a triple cap setup. The first is, of course, the stock cap, which I mentioned is the orange dot. It has those nice hard edges. I was really happy with that. You can see the beautiful atomization there. Great for flares. The second one is a Lego thin cap. It's not the thinnest, but it's a very nice mid-range cap. And the third is actually a flame skinny blue cap. It's one of the skinniest caps you can get, and on a high pressure can, it actually might make a great outline cap. So the cream cap here is a little bit like the Lego thin cap. The nice valves on these Dang Highflow cans really assist because it atomizes paint so well, so it is a nice sort of mid-range cap as well. Next up is the Molotov Skinny here. You can see it looks a little bit misty around the edges, although that's mostly me just not really holding it close enough. It is a very, very skinny cap. My beef with it is it's just a little bit slower. It feels a little bit slow. So to each their own, some people might really like this cap. As far as New York fat caps go, they're pretty much always top class, and when you have an even semi-decent valve system on a can like these Dang Highflow cans, it's just that much better, so you can never go wrong with a New York fat. I'll leave it at that. I tried next the Carolina fat cap just because it is the stock cap coming on the Dang Prime low pressure paint, so a lot of people might be buying some of the low pressure cans, some of the high pressure cans together, using them for different parts of pieces, and I found that the Carolina fat cap had nice hard edges when used on the Dang Highflow cans as well. The rest of the fat caps I tested out here, I don't want to get into anything in particular with them. The only relevant thing I will say with respect to the Dang Highflow cans is that the second last cap you can see me doing here, the Widowmaker fat cap, which is the iron lac version of sort of a pink dot. Traditionally on iron lac cans, those just look like garbage. They vomit out paint, whereas on this one, something that has a bit of a better valve system, it actually works quite well. So if anything is to prove that the valve systems here are a little bit nicer, it is that Widowmaker fat cap, and I was really impressed with that. The rest of the fat caps, I would say the can sprays in a way that represents how the caps are in general, so nothing to comment there. Okay, so now that we have done some tags, some throws, and some pieces with the Dang Highflow paint, link in the description, by the way, if you want your very own Tags, Throws, and Pieces shirt. I am going to keep my promise and tell you exactly what I thought of this paint, if it's a buy from me or if it's one that I'm just gonna not really integrate into my painting myself. The way I'm gonna do that is, first I'll tell you the things about the Dang Highflow paint that impressed me, some of the things that might not have impressed me. I'll tell you exactly, for your benefit, what type of graffiti writer, artist, muralist would like to try this paint out and who it might not be for exactly. And of course I'll conclude with that rating out of 10 that I said I'd throw in there. And to start off, I noticed two things in particular that really impressed me. The first of those being the color vibrancy. All the colors I used in each of sort of the areas of the color wheel were all very vibrant. That is one of the things Bombing Science emphasizes in their sort of marketing of the Dang Highflow spray paint, so that was nice to see that hold true. The second thing that I was impressed with, and this is legitimately the thing I was most impressed with, was the valve systems on these Dang Highflow spray paint cans. They actually are something else, I have to say. Like, they're actually probably above average by quite a margin. So really overall, with the type of paint that's in here and the sort of softer valve that atomizes really smoothly, very nicely, I think because of that factor in particular, these could make for a very nice can and paint to be using if you're doing some sort of serious pieces with fades and that kind of thing. But I do have to tell you the negatives that I noticed with this paint, and there was really just one major one, and this won't be a surprise to you guys, but just a couple colors seem to be a little bit transparent. The most concerning of those just being the white. I felt like I had to do 2-3 layers with a white just to get a nice sharp white, and when you want to just do like a quick highlight or something and you don't want to play around with doing 3 coats of a little tiny highlight, that's a little bit of an issue. And that can be a little bit of an issue for colors that are lighter that you want to try and do fades with. You need nice thick layers if you're going to be trying to fade in between them, sort of. So that was the only major issue that I took with the paint. And just to answer the question for you in particular, whoever may be watching this, is this a paint that you might want to pick up and try, or maybe not? I'm going to tell you 3 types of graffiti writers and artists who might want to try this paint out. Number 1, the budget-conscious graffiti artist. You can't argue that Dang paint does undercut the competition. You can go to the Bombing Science site and you'll see that. Another type of graffiti artist who might like this paint is if you're a writer doing a lot of practice pieces and you don't necessarily want to use the highest quality, like $7-8 Molotov cans for practice piecing and that kind of stuff, then this is a great alternative to a brand like that. This gives you the nice feel, especially with that valve system, of a very nice can to give you some good practice with while being a little bit lighter on the wallet for you. And sort of fitting into that is a third type of graffiti artist that might enjoy this, and that's a graffiti artist who paint a lot, who are really active at the moment. This higher pressure paint is nice for sort of the bombing scene probably, but also if you're painting a lot, saving $1 a can adds up very quickly and you're gonna get some very nice savings there. Additionally, if you don't necessarily fit into one of those 3 categories, I probably still recommend giving the Dang Highflow paint a try, just because it is a very nice paint to work with in general, and you might notice something about it yourself that you like, and you might want to integrate it into certain parts of your graffiti. So with all that being taken into account, my overall rating for this paint, I'd have to give it a solid 8 out of 10. And yes, I do want to acknowledge that the 2-point gap between perfect and this is largely due to just the opacity of a couple colors, because in some cases that can be a very big deal depending on what kind of painting you're doing. But overall, I can't emphasize enough that the Dang Highflow paint here is a very high quality paint. Overall, I was very impressed with it. And a lot of you might be wondering, well, this paint seems good, should I be trying it? Or you mentioned the Dang Prime paint, which is the low pressure paint. If you do want some more information on that, the Dang Prime paint will be on screen right now, my in-depth review of that. I'd recommend checking that out. It has a very nice opacity test in it as well, which is relevant to the low pressure paint and this paint. So if you want to make the most educated, informed decision about trying the Dang Highflow or Prime paint out, check that review out. I hope to see you over there very soon. Until the next one, peace.